It's me, Miss Hatfield, not Adele. Today I'm here to talk to you about the punctuation rules that you need to know in order to do well on the SAT. You're welcome. So first we're going to talk about 3 punctuation marks that a lot of juniors or people in general are scared of because they just don't know how to use them. The first is a semicolon. So there are a few ways to use a semicolon, but the most common way is to put a semicolon between 2 complete thoughts. So if I can have a period in between 2 sentences, I can also have a semicolon. So if you look at the example, I like ice cream. It is my favorite food. Both of those are complete thoughts, so I can put a semicolon in between. Also, you could put a transition word after the semicolon, so I can have a complete thought, a semicolon, a transition word, and then a comma, and then another complete thought. So that could be something like, Miss Hatfield is a great singer, semicolon. However, comma, Adele may be better, period. That works. The next punctuation mark is a colon. Similar to a semicolon, there must be one complete thought before the colon. So my favorite flavor of ice cream is only found at Julienne's. And then I can have a colon because that is a complete sentence. However, I follow a colon with either a one word, a list, or maybe even a complete thought or a phrase. Whatever comes after the colon helps explain in a little more detail whatever came before the colon. So if I read my favorite flavor of ice cream is only found at Julienne's, I don't know what flavor that is, so I give a colon and then I answer the question, cherry amaretto. So whatever comes after the colon helps explain something in front of the colon. And the third confusing punctuation mark is a dash. It could be used the same way as a colon sometimes, but usually on the SAT, it's used in a pair. So it separates extra information that interrupts a complete thought. I'm looking forward to my favorite holiday activity, dash, playing card games with my family, dash, during my time off from school. So if I took out whatever is surrounded by dashes, the sentence still makes sense. So a tip to use would be if you see one dash, look and see if there should be a second dash in the sentence. You always want to have either dash, dash, or comma, comma around extra info. You don't want one of each. Is bad, and that error is made when you have a complete thought, a comma, and then another complete thought. You cannot put just a comma between 2 complete thoughts. There are 3 ways to fix a comma splice error. You can either replace the comma with a period, you can keep the comma and add a fanboys, no, not one of those people who cheers for Adele, but instead fanboys is in reference to the words for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. Or, like I said before, you could put a semicolon in the middle. So, avoid those comma splices. Now, there are a couple other things you want to avoid when using commas. You do not want to separate the subject of a sentence from its verb. So the sentence reads, the big gray house with the white picket fence is my house. There's no reason to put a comma in there between house, big gray house, and the word is. I like to call that an awk comma because it's awkward. So if that would produce an awkward pause in a sentence, don't do it. Sometimes though, you do have to separate extra information from the main thought of a sentence. And you need to surround that sometimes with 2 commas. So in order to test if you need a comma, John Baylor, who is a standardized test-taking tips giver pro, says that you should exaggerate the pause when you're reading a sentence. If you think there should be a comma there, or if you're testing it out, pause for a little bit of an extra time to hear if that is an awk comma and you don't need it, or to hear if that's a natural place to pause in a sentence. So for example, Miss Hatfield, a teacher at South who loves grammar and coffee, is also an AP language teacher. I made that up. Anyway, I exaggerated the pause and it made sense to pause there, so I think both of those commas are correct. But if I had a sentence like, Miss Hatfield walks to work, that's an awkward comma. I wouldn't want to separate Miss Hatfield from walks with a comma. I don't walk to work. I also made that up. All right, and the last don't rule with commas is you do not want to separate prepositional phrases with commas. So there are a lot of prepositions, and prepositions and prepositional phrases are usually small words, and if you want to learn them, I usually tell students to think about a cup or bucket and a cat. This is a cat. That cat can be next to the cup, in the cup, can go around the cup, through the cup, dumb cat, under the cup, and can be with the cup. So all of those words that I just named that show kind of relationally where the cat is with the cup, those are prepositions. There's one preposition that doesn't really follow that rule that the SAT uses a lot, and that's the word of. So of is a preposition. And you don't want to put commas around prepositional phrases. They're little phrases that just get to be in the sentence with no commas. So the sentence, the dog in the middle of the yard is my dog. That's a lot of commas in there. We don't want any of those commas because in the middle is a prepositional phrase, you know, cat, in, and of the yard is a prepositional phrase, so we don't put commas around those phrases. All right, so let's take a look at two practice questions from the SAT. Proponents of organic food are quick to add that there are numerous other reasons to buy organic food, such as a desire to protect the environment from potentially damaging pesticides. So the first test-taking tip that I have for you is to always read to the period. Never try to answer the question before you've read through the entire sentence. So when I read that, before I even look at the answer choices, something seems a little off to me. It seems like there was one too many commas. So now I'm going to look at the answers. No change doesn't seem right to me. And let me test out the colon. So before a colon, there must be a complete sentence. If I go back to that sentence and read it quickly, if I end with such as colon, I'm not ending with a complete thought. Such as period is not complete. So B's out. Proponents of organic food are quick to add that there are numerous other reasons to buy organic food, such as, comma, and then a desire to protect the environment. That's the place where I thought it sounded a little bit awkward. So let me check D. So D would be saying there are numerous other reasons to buy organic food, such as a desire to protect the environment from potentially damaging pesticides. So D's correct because I have a complete thought, a comma, and then a phrase that talks more about that complete thought. Okay, this is a long sentence, so remember, you're going to want to wait to answer until you've read the entire sentence. Today's researchers have found that the veritable army of trained volunteers traveling the country conducting face-to-face interviews can sometimes be replaced by another army, the vast array of individuals volunteering details about their lives and, inadvertently, their language through social media. So one of the reasons this question was missed by a lot of students is because it's so long. So the first thing you're going to want to do to help yourself is cross out phrases that are extra information and just kind of whittle it down to the essentials of the sentence. So if you notice at the end of the sentence there's a phrase surrounded by 2 dashes, and I told you earlier that means it's extra. So I can cross that out and just ignore it for the purpose of this question. If I look at the beginning of the sentence, there's a lot of description of what types of volunteers. So I'm going to cross out traveling the country, conducting face-to-face interviews, because that's just describing the volunteers. So I'm left with, today's researchers have found that the veritable army of trained volunteers can sometimes be replaced by another army. And if you heard me read the sentence the first time, I naturally paused there because the next part seemed to describe army. So I know there's going to be some punctuation after the word army. And that was a complete thought up to that word. So if I'm looking at the answer choices, A doesn't seem right to me because to have nothing after that first word army seems weird because the next phrase is describing the army. B is not right because I'm not going to want to put a dash and then a phrase and then a comma. Remember, it's either 2 dashes or 2 commas. Also, by is a preposition. The cat can be by the cup, so I'm not going to want to put 2 commas around that phrase anyway. So A and B are out. If I look at C, I see a semicolon. And I know that a semicolon must have one complete sentence, which we've determined that that first part is a complete sentence, but the second half must also be complete. So if you look at that sentence, the vast array of individuals volunteering details about their lives through social media, remember I can ignore that little extra info, that's not a complete sentence. It doesn't have a complete thought all on its own. It's describing the first half. So C's out, and I'm left with D. So I'm just going to double check that D works. If I'm going to use a colon, I need to have a complete thought before the colon, and then whatever follows the colon has to help explain something in the first half of the sentence. So today's researchers have found that the veritable army of trained volunteers can sometimes be replaced by another army. Yes, that's a complete sentence. I can put a colon there, and then what comes after explains or describes that other army, the another army. Colon, the vast array of individuals volunteering details about their lives through social media. So D is the correct answer. It took me a little bit longer, but it was worth it. And that's all. Goodbye.